All right, Dennis, long time coming. I love what you guys are doing with stick mobility. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, Dr. Parker, for having me on. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump right into it. And it's funny, I was in Vegas and I was at Lifetime and I saw the stick mobility sticks there. I said, "Oh, I'm gonna be talking
Okay.
to these guys soon." We're there. And would love to hear the journey of how stick mobility came to be, your experience with that.
We started by Neil and I. We were doing stick stretching with a chiropractor over Santa Cruz, California, Dr. Arthur Fagenholtz. And he used rattan sticks to teach his patients how to stretch. And so after we worked with him and gone through his education, we just realized there's a lot more than just the stretches because a lot of our program is strength training. Mobility requires strength. So we understood that there's a lot of isometrics and you got the other principles of science, leverage,
Mhm.
stability that can really be taught and utilized with the stick. So we started our own system from there. And that was back in 2015 is when we launched. And it's taken off from there. The growth has been steady. It was nice because it was nice and organic, especially back in 2015. You really let the community dictate where you were going to go. And we didn't really have a lot of expectations, to be honest with you. Like
Yeah.
people think, oh, you guys were, expecting this to blow up. And we're like, no, we just wanted to really introduce something a little different than what most people were doing as far as mobility work was concerned. And for us, it was just more, okay, let's get some more, private practice business drummed up. And then all of a sudden it just took off from there. And
Yeah.
we realized, oh, this is going to be a little bit bigger than we ever thought. Yeah.
What do you make of what I consider kind of the rapid increase in trainers, especially service providers in our field, wanting to learn more about mobility and stability?
I think it's because it's one of the things that really isn't addressed specifically enough. And, reading articles over 20 plus years of, especially in the bodybuilding, powerlifting community, when you ask, when they ask seasoned lifters, what's, if you could go back and what's one of the biggest things that you regret not working on? And typically across the board, mobility is one of those aspects that a lot of people are like, I wish I would have spent more time, emphasizing that and working on it. I think it's like we like to say, you can deadlift 500 pounds until you can't, right? And so what good is that if you can't roll out of bed? So,
Right.
we worked with trainers and bodybuilders who look great, they're strong, they look great, and then they're laid up for a week because they couldn't roll out of bed. And so you're
Yeah.
like, well, you gotta spend some more time thinking about just your ability to get from point A to point B.
Do you think there was maybe a tipping point at some point that you and Neil saw that more people were open to the idea of incorporating mobility?
I mean, I think for me, it was just uh, working with older adults
Mm,
is really where you started to see the value in that. Yes, you older adults, we still want to load them. We still want them strong. We want to make sure that they aren't afraid of being strong, right? So there's still a
right.
lot of people that are like, oh, I don't, they're kind of fearful of that. But the biggest quality that we want to give to people is empowering them. And one of the biggest ways to do that, especially with the aging population, is the ability for them to move well and to be independent. And that is something that really you can't put a price tag on.
I totally agree. I was just doing a talk about this, about functional independence. And
Mhm,
it sounds not glamorous to a lot of people when you talk about it, but it's
yeah,
incredibly, incredibly important. I mean, if this, I think we've been such an aesthetic society, and you still see
mhm,
it. But what's
mhm.
the point of that if you do not have functional independence?
Yeah, I agree. Aesthetics training is always going to be at the forefront of
Yeah.
fitness. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be the majority. But I think we need to be understanding of the fact that there's not a human being alive that's not going to deal with some type of pain or some type of injury issue at some point in their lives. And so at that point, you know, do you have the ability to get them to help them understand that, hey, the quality of your movement and the quality of your joints is vital to your aesthetics training,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you're injured, you can't train. So the aesthetic suffers as a result of that. So um, I think that's one of the aspects for me personally too. You know, when I
Yeah.
first started this industry, I was like every other trainer. Oh, I'll help you lose weight, you know,
Yeah.
help you look good. And then it just about 4 or 5 years into my career is when I went, oh, wait a second, like everybody deals with pain. And
Yeah.
this is something that, like a lot of people at the time, just weren't really addressing specifically. So that's when I started to kind of veer off into saying, okay, I want people to come in who need help just getting through daily life and just getting something as simple as getting in and out of their car pain free, getting up out of a chair pain free, things that, you know, up and down stairs, things that a
Yeah.
lot of us take for granted. That when you don't have that ability, you go, oh, damn.
Yeah. How do you best convey this to a younger generation? You know, when you're young, you don't feel like that's gonna be you, in the future.
Mm. And that is the big, because I'll tell you what, me personally, if you would have told me at 20 years old that I needed to do mobility work, I literally would have been like, whatever, you know, like, because it one of the years old, you know, a warm-up set was just
Yeah.
lightweight,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean, that's all it was. You know, that was my warm-up, right? Okay, I bicep curl 135, well, my warm-up set is 60, you
Yeah.
know? A bar and a 5-pound plate on each side, okay, just warm up the biceps, now let's get into the working sets, right? And that's what that was
Yeah.
my warm-up, and it wasn't until, you know, I got into my early 30s when I went, "Oh, okay, things gotta change a little bit here," right?
Mhm.
So, it was for me personally, it was a big injury on my left wrist, being a little stupid at the gym, not picking up the right bar, and then, the wrist went all the way back,
Mm.
when it was fully loaded, so that created some of issues upstream, of course, into the elbow,
Yeah.
and so that's when I was like, "Okay, well, I gotta do something a little different here if I wanna get over this issue," and so that's when I started me personally, have that little bit of paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So it is tough to tell younger kids. But I think for me personally, I like to get younger people to do their aesthetics training, but then also say, hey, do something that requires usable mobility, right?
Yeah.
You know, whether it's a sport, whether it's dancing, whether it's a sport, anything that's going to get them to think outside of the aesthetics aspect.
Yeah. I love that usable mobility. That's a great way, kind of a gateway to it in a
Yeah,
sense,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
because it's so
I mean, I think
difficult.
for yeah, well, like for combat sports, you know, you've seen
Yeah.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu and all these types of forms of training now. And for me, it's like trying to get people rock climbing, things like that,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, go do your bicep curls, go do your chest presses, do that, you know, get the glamour muscles, you know,
Yeah.
built up. But then also, hey, do this other stuff on the side, and then you'll get the best of both worlds.
What's been the most surprising thing about what you're doing over the past couple years? Like where you're like, "Oh, I didn't see this coming," when venturing into mobility?
I think a lot of it is more people's perspective on it, right?
Mm.
We always are talking about using isometrics when we do our mobility work, right? And most people's perception, they just don't, even in the training community, they're just so inundated and so indoctrinated with passive modalities,
Yeah.
right? And so that's one of my core principles as far as teaching is, hey, your mobility work should be just that. It should be work. It should take some effort. And you
Right.
know, your heart, you should be sweating a little bit. Like you should be like, oh, I'm giving some effort, right?
Yes.
If you're laying on the floor and just laying there looking at your phone, you're telling me that you're doing mobility work. I got to be like, I don't know. Are you really?
Yeah,
Um, a piece of broccoli laying on the floor might be just as productive as you are right now. So, and when you give people that feedback as far as giving them to, even without the stick, right?
right.
You give somebody a towel or a strap or something, you say, hey, push and pull on this while you're in this position. Then they go, oh, that feels amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're understanding this is active mobility work versus the passive stuff that we're just kind of used to. And not saying the passive mobility work
Sure.
isn't fun and enjoyable. They all have their places. But we have to kind of teach people what the difference between the two are.
What's the difference in discussing this with, colleagues, trainers versus general population?
For trainers, it's just more about just getting them to experience it,
Mm,
right? I mean, we can talk about it, but and our egos are a thing, right?
right,
So a lot
sure.
of trainers are, trainers like, oh no, I know exactly what you're doing. I get it, I get it. And you're like, okay,
Eh,
well, let me put you into a couple moves just to make
yeah,
sure that you get it, right? And so that person that's like, oh no, I got this, and then you cue them and you put them into some movements, and then that face lights up, and you're like, yeah, not what
yeah,
you expected, right? So
right.
kind of, now you're really understanding. So I think for me, with working with colleagues, it's more just like with the general population. It's more about the experience, the tactile feedback, and that's what really sells, and that's what gets people hooked into what you're doing.
Do you feel like stick mobility is a way for people to get more in touch with their bodies as well as their mobility?
Yeah, very much so. Especially when we're talking about fascial trains, right, and
Mhm. Yeah,
kinetic chains, right, and to trainers coming out that are just learning, that are brand new to the industry, that's way over here
yeah,
above them, right? So instead of talking to them and they're like, I have no idea what you're saying, what you're talking about, you know, giving them a stick and cueing them and putting them into positions gets them to realize, oh wow, this da 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 da
yeah,
all the
that's
way
right.
down here, right? And then you go, okay, and the same with the general population too. When you tell somebody, "Hey, your right hand is connected all the way down to your left foot," they're like, "No, okay, sure it is, right?" So sometimes, and then you tell somebody, "Hey, you've got these things called spiral lines, right?
Mhm.
Each appendage has a spiral line. Your midsection, your torso has a spiral line. Let's get you to feel that rotation, right? Let's get you to feel those spiral lines." And so when you give somebody a specific drill to facilitate those spiral lines, that's when you once again get that, "Oh,
Yeah,
wow, now I know what you're talking about." So, yeah, it very much we use it to really get people to lock segments of their body together that they may not have been able to access, especially when we talk about rib cage and pelvis
yeah,
relationship,
mhm.
right? We know a lot of people don't know how to
That's
regulate
right.
that
Yeah.
relationship, right? So for us, we use the stick to teach somebody how to regulate that relationship. And once they feel it, they're like, oh, that, wow, okay, I've never experienced that feedback before. And so that's a big eye opener for them.
Oh, yeah, and, it's interesting, the gym is a funny place because, you think you're coming there or wherever you're working out to work on your body and
Mhm.
be connected to your body, but often when we're there, we're doing a lot of things to not be connected to our body at the same time. You ever experience this? But it's like
Oh, yeah.
it's kinda weird, you know? It's like
Yeah. Well, it's you go to a box gym, right? And you see it, single joint movements,
yeah,
and listen, aesthetically, you look great. That's
yeah,
fantastic. It builds up the confidence, which is fantastic. But I think that a lot of times too, there's the things that really give you usable range of motion. Sometimes, uh, uh, especially from the male standpoint,
mm,
is, oh, it's not cool, right?
right,
I mean,
right.
how many guys don't do yoga
Right,
because it's not cool, right?
right,
Things that, how many guys don't dance because it's not cool,
right,
right?
right.
But these are the things that require your body to go through leverage,
Yep.
stabilization, the things that physics require us to deal with every day, right?
Yes.
So and that's the problem is people just don't want to be uncomfortable, and you
Yes.
have to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and doing things that are outside of your norm, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? When we all start something that's new, we all suck at it.
That's
It's
totally true.
right. I mean, it is the way it is, right? So everybody's ego is going to take a hit, right?
Yeah.
And what we do is with the consistency and practice, we get better at it, right? Some of us get exponentially better.
Right.
Some of us get incrementally better, but there's still improvement, right?
Yeah.
And it's like back in the day when I used to tell people, look, the biggest, baddest dude in the gym at one point was a 90-pound weakling,
Right.
but it was consistency. It was
Yeah.
effort. It was being there every day. And so not just with aesthetics training, but same thing with mobility training. It's the consistency. It's the
Yeah.
efforts that you put into it, right? It's not something that's going to instantaneously take care of itself in one application. It's the repetitiveness and the doing it over and over again.
Yeah, most definitely, which, is really difficult because having a consistent, sustained effort is a very difficult part of the human condition. When something is
Yeah.
uncomfortable, you try not to do it regularly, for that.
Yeah.
Like, you
Right.
literally try not to do it. Like
Oh, right. But I think that's where you see the separation between personalities, right?
Yes.
Uh, you know, let's take athletes, for example. The what separates the person on the bench versus the Hall of Fame athlete? Skill wise, physically, okay, there's just a
Yeah.
small minutia difference, right? But really, what it comes down to is it's the ability to attack your deficiencies. The greatest athletes of their sport understood their deficiencies, and when they recognized it, they said, "No, no, no, no.
Yeah.
I'm not, that's not going to be me anymore." Right. And so, when Michael Jordan came into the NBA, what was everybody's knock on him? Right. They
Yep.
said, okay, you go to the basket all the time, but you don't really have a mid-range game. Right.
Right.
Even though we know, well, he sunk a really important shot in North Carolina,
Yeah,
right? Which
that's
was
right.
not in front of the basket.
That's
He was
exactly right.
outside. Right. So what did he do? He said, okay, well, I'm going to develop the fadeaway jump shot. Right. Okay. But
Yeah.
he took something that he was criticized about, something that he was considered to be a deficiency, and said, okay, no. And so that's what I love when I see with my clients is the ability to get them to go, okay, I recognize I have to be consistent. I've got to put in the effort. And I've got to attack the things that I'm not good at,
Right.
because that actually makes me better at the things that I'm already good at.
Right.
Right. So I think a lot of our job is more the psychology than it is
Most
actually the
definitely.
application of the movements, right?
In my 23 years, it's mostly psychology.
Yeah,
With people, it's
it
just
really
I
is.
mean, because 'cause you're literally asking people to do things that are counterintuitive to the human condition.
Oh,
It's like, why would I do this? Like, it's like,
right?
this is uncomfortable. It's like
Yeah, a and and I always tell my clients are like, "Do you do this?" And I'm like, "Yes."
yes,
I never ask you to do anything that I haven't done or don't do on a consistent basis,
exactly.
right? And that's where demonstration comes in, right? So when you tell somebody, "I want you to do this," when you do it and make it look easy,
Easy, yeah.
that's when they go, "Oh, you actually do this." Yeah, I do. I mean, if I can't tell you to do something and then not be able
Yes.
to walk the walk, right? So,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of stuff that I've experienced, like the 90-90 position. That's the
Yeah.
position that when I first got into it, oh my God, it was horrible. I was like, this is just atrocious. But then I realized I've got to, I've got to get better at this.
That's right.
It's not only just from my clients, but it's for my own personal overall health, right? I want
Yeah.
my hips to be buttery.
That's
I want to
exactly right.
move well, right? So once I got into it and I realized, oh, this is the deficiency, then I said, okay, I've got to put in the consistent effort. I've got to be in a, 1 minute a day minimum, right?
Yep.
And then you look, especially when you look at cultures where they still work on the floor, and a ninety
Yes,
ninety position is a very comfortable working
completely.
position for them, right?
Yes.
Like I just went to Thailand not too long ago, and when I was touring and I was in some of the temples, people are sitting in the 90-90.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like,
Oh,
and
yes.
they're comfortable. Like this is no
Yes.
big deal to them, right? So yeah, it's taking those things and seeing how people use them and saying, okay, I've got to get better at that. And so it took me a good year and a half to get to the point where
Yeah.
I actually kind of enjoyed it,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm similar. I
So
love
yeah,
that position. I all the time, and I've been a huge proponent of hip mobility, hip complex mobility, shoulder joint mobility, all that stuff. And it's funny when I demonstrate, I going through mobility exercise with clients, they go, "Always looks so pretty when you do it." I said, "Well, I've been doing this for a long time, like since
yeah,
like the early 2000s. Like I understood
yeah.
this very quickly that this is a huge component." I said, "But there shouldn't be a comparison. You're starting at a certain point. I'm at a different point. You know, it's
Mhm.
how it is." But I wanted to ask you, Dennis, how you see this playing into athletic populations, whether it's, let's say, collegiate, professional. Is there, I'm not in the professional collegiate environment. Is there a big emphasis in mobility in those environments at this point, from what you've seen?
Yeah, there's a big turn towards that, especially on the recovery aspect side.
Okay.
So, we had the privilege of working with, the USC staff back in 2018.
Okay.
And so for them, it was after we took their coaching staff and their medical side also through the course. For their football team, what they did is they would track with the software that they could put in close now, they track their football team's output. And so the 30 players that show the greatest reduction in output from the first quarter to the end of the game, they would come in the next day for a half-hour recovery class using the sticks
Yeah.
to help accelerate the recovery process before going, because then they got to train for the next game and through practice, right? So we see that a lot. As far as the other aspect too, is the sticks are great because the feedback is better. So you get a better connection with the athlete, right? And we see that a lot of times in warm-ups with professional team colleges, the warm-ups are kind of
Yeah.
half-ass.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
You're watching them and you're kind of like, are you really doing anything? They're kind of just going through the motions.
That's
So,
right.
but when you put a stick in somebody's hand and you give them specific cues and the feedback increases, now mentally that person is more tapped in and
Yeah.
now they're engaged, right? So now that warm up, that dynamic warm up becomes better, right?
Right.
So they use it from a dynamic warm up standpoint, and then afterwards they can do a post game recovery session.
You think this will be even a larger portion of professional sports because injuries are part of playing, especially contact sports. But obviously, there's a lot of money involved, and even more now. Is the money actually facilitating more emphasis in recovery because you want your best players out there?
Owners do not want to be signing checks for people that aren't playing. It's
That's
as
right.
simple as that, right? If I own a team and I'm writing checks, I don't want to be writing checks to an athlete that's been on the shelf for 5 months. Like I just don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so from you get paid to play, right? That's your mission, right? And from a strength and conditioning standpoint, especially with the elite with at the professional level, these players are not going to get much faster. They're not going to get
Right.
much stronger. They're already at that level. So the focus should be actually more on making availability the number one priority, right?
Yeah.
I need to make sure that this person can be on the court, can be on the rink, can be on the pitch, whatever it is, right? And so, how do I make sure that this person has the resiliency that they need? And that's the connective tissue's got to be resilient. The joints have to be buttery, and that emphasis has to be there, right? Because yeah, okay, the person comes in and they squat 600 pounds.
Right.
Okay, well,
Right.
is there really a significant difference if I get the guy to squat 625? You know,
Right. Yeah.
and, is there really going to be that much difference in the output on the field? Who's to say, right? There's
Yeah.
arguments for and
Sure.
against that, right? So But for me, it's okay. I need to make sure that person, if they roll their ankle, that they have the lateral ankle mobility through the connective tissue and the muscle fibers to be able to say, okay, if you roll your ankle, do you sprain it or does it just become an inconvenience?
Mm,
Right.
mm,
Because in high school, I sprained both my ankles 4 times.
yeah,
I played hockey and then I played soccer in the off season. Well, a hockey boot, you're locked in, like the ankles are
yeah,
just boom, right? But then you go play soccer. Well, soccer is where I would sprain my ankles, right? But then I grew up at a time where high tops became a big thing, right?
yeah,
So you
yeah, I
were
remember
wearing
that.
high tops all the
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
Right. So,
yeah.
um, and so so here I have ankle sprains on both ankles 4 times, and my doctor is all like, "Oh, you're always gonna have weak ankles. You're never gonna be really strong to those." Okay, well now I can squat on the sides of my ankles with load, right? I can jump up and down and run on the sides of my ankles. So when I do roll my ankle, now for me now, it doesn't become a sprain. It's just
Yeah,
whoops, okay. It's an inconvenience. Okay, a little tweak. Oh, no big deal. And then I just keep going on. So
yeah.
it's the ability to prepare those tissues and try to create as much resiliency as possible for the athlete that you can.
I experienced that same thing. I've sprained my ankle many times, and I just keep going. It's never been like a hindrance for me, where it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you guys, I'm out for 2 or 3 weeks." It's just never been a thing. I have a lot of flexibility in that joint. It just is like, "Oh, it kinda hurts a little bit," but it's never but you see other people where that happens, and it's a game changer for them. It's they're done for a
Mhm.
while, you know?
Very much. And I think a lot of it too comes with your mindset towards the injury, right?
Yeah,
I mindset is so much, right?
completely.
And for example, Jeremy Renner, right? Jeremy Renner
Yeah.
is 10 months out from being run over and he's
Yes.
back to running. 10
Crazy, right?
months, right? I mean, he literally was this close to dying.
Yeah,
And 10 months later, he's running up and down inclines, right?
yeah.
And yet my wife worked with a lady who sprained her ankle, and 6 weeks later, her doctor had to tell her to stop using crutches,
Dang. Yeah,
right? But that's the
right.
mindset,
Different,
right?
yeah,
His mindset.
for sure.
Jeremy Renner's all like, "No, no, 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 no. I'm not letting this shit change who I am,"
No.
right? And you watched his approach to his
Yes.
rehab, and it was aggressive. Like, he's all like, "No, I'm attacking this." But you got this coworker of my wife's who's on the opposite end of the
Right.
spectrum, and she's just literally babying this ankle
Yeah.
for 6 weeks to the point where even her doctor's all like, "Okay, you gotta get
You
over
gotta.
this.
Come on.
Like,
Yeah.
come on." Right?
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Do you is there I'd be curious if in how much you look into this. I don't know. I haven't looked at it too much about kind of the correlation between mobility work and injury reduction. Has there been a lot of research into this and specifically with stick mobility or just general other types of
no, I don't really think there's been a lot, because I think it's hard to do because I know when you talk to, Dr. Keith Barr talks about how we can look at connective tissue now, right? And
Mhm.
we know that there's 7 genetic markers for the quality of connective tissue that you're born with. So I think
Mm.
it's hard to correlate, okay, what end of the spectrum are you on connective
Right.
tissue quality, yeah, genetically? And
Hmm.
then how much does the mobility work help or not help?
Yeah.
Those are tough things to kind of quantify empirically. I know for me, anecdotally, it's been a massive help for me
Yeah.
personally. Because I know when I still play hockey, the times that I have had injuries, the severity of the injury and how quickly I bounce back is significantly better than what I know it would have been probably 20 years ago when I
Yeah.
wasn't doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, I move better now as 51 than I did at 31,
Same here, man.
right?
Same, yeah.
It's so empirically though, for numbers people,
Yeah.
it's hard to quantify that. It
Yeah.
really is.
It
So,
yeah, it is
um,
difficult. Yeah, and I'm just such a big proponent of people being on the ground, like, spending
yeah,
time on the ground. Like, I always talk to my clients, I say, it's funny when you're a child, you spend a lot of time on the ground. And then as you get
Mhm.
older, you start learning to fear the ground. And then
Yeah.
older and
Yeah.
older, then all of a sudden the ground is like, I can't fall. I cannot fall. This is a problem.
Yeah.
And then so we have to take away this fear of like what happens. We're taking the ground away from our bodies and being close.
Mhm.
And that I think is a huge part of this whole discussion is we're just taking away people's ability to be independent and to be close to the ground. Because you and I
Mhm.
probably know plenty of people who are like, they fall, it's over, man.
Oh,
And a
yeah.
lot of deaths and people get older as you get exponentially older, 50s, 60s, 70s are attributed to falling
Yeah.
and not being
Yeah.
able to
Very
buffer that,
much.
you know?
Yeah. Well, because we see hip fractures,
Yeah,
broken hips, spines,
yeah,
but because they don't put pressure on those
right,
bones. And so when you're on the ground, it's teaching people, look, the ground is the safest place you can be.
right,
Like you're there, like you're
right,
already there. And the beautiful thing is when you're on the ground and you kind of reach back to your childhood, then you start to move on the ground. Well, you're loading your bones, you're putting pressure on them, right? And so when your doctor's talking to you about, oh, you need to increase your bone density, yeah, we want to load you mechanically, right? We
yes,
want to give you load, but we also want to load you by putting you in touch with the ground so gravity can help assist you
that's
with that,
right.
right? And not only that, but then doing rolling so that you start to put
Mhm,
pressure on the shoulder joints and all
yeah,
these other areas, right? And so, me personally, one of the things that I've worked on increasing in the last 10 years is rolling patterns on the
yep,
ground, just doing somersaults and doing tumbling, right?
same.
Things that I
Yeah,
did when I was in gymnastics when I was
right,
7, 8 years of age.
yep,
I'm reincorporating back into my own personal training protocols, right? So, uh, and that's been fun to get back in touch with. But yeah, the ground is a really easy place to be. It's gonna your percentage of injuries when you're on the ground are really low.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think that's one of my favorite places, especially like I said, with aging population,
yes,
because we've got to get them comfortable with getting up and down off the floor and being able to put pressure on their body with the ground.
yeah, most definitely. Dennis, this has been enlightening. Seriously, I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. I would love for everyone to hear how they can learn more about stick mobility and be a part of this movement that I am very passionate about, as well as getting people more mobile, more functionally independent.
Well, thank you. You can go to our website, stickmobility.com. There you'll find the sticks that we sell, other products that we have. And if you're a trainer or even just general population, we have courses. And Neil and I have set up our education to be digestible enough for just the average fitness enthusiast. Someone who's at home, we try to not talk over your head. We want to keep things as simple as possible, so that way you understand the benefits out of it. So, but technically, technical enough for the professional to go, okay, this is legit, this is valid stuff. So that's where you'll find our education. On YouTube, if you look up stickmobilitytv.com or whatever that is, I don't even Stick Mobility TV on YouTube. You'll see our channel. Please subscribe. And we got a ton of free content on there. So we've got workouts, we've got specific movements for specific areas that you may be wanting to focus on. And then Instagram, it's Stick Mobility.
Awesome. Dennis, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, man.
Dr. Parker, I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.